In the quiet town of Graythorn, nestled between thick, ominous woods, children often gathered after school to share stories. The sun would set, casting long shadows as they sat on the grassy hillside, their imaginations ignited by tales of adventure, mystery, and the unexplained. It was a place where laughter rang through the air, but on particularly eerie evenings, when the fog rolled in thick and veiled the world outside, their stories took a darker turn. This was the kind of night that sent a shiver down their spines as they spoke in hushed tones, their eyes wide with wonder and fear. Among the curious children was Tommy, a boy with a wild imagination and an insatiable thirst for the macabre. Tommy had a knack for finding the creepy corners of Graythorn's history. He loved to dig into old tales that sent icy fingers down their backs. On those spooky evenings, his friends would sit around him, wide-eyed, hanging on his every word, even if sometimes his stories made them jumpy. They might cover their mouths with their hands, or glance toward the dark woods, half expecting a ghost or a ghoul to jump out at them. Tommy's passion for the strange made him a leader in their little band, drawing them into a world of fantasy, where the shadows held secrets and the night was alive with possibilities. One damp afternoon, while rummaging through the dusty attic of his grandmother's old house, Tommy's explorations took a fascinating turn. The attic was a treasure trove of forgotten things. Boxes filled with dusty old toys, faded photographs, and weathered books, all covered in layers of dust. Tommy enjoyed exploring every corner, imagining each item having its own magical story. However, his heart raced as he stumbled upon a worn leather journal. It appeared ancient, its cover cracked and peeling, like something straight out of a spell-binding novel. As he carefully opened it, a rancid smell wafted toward him, making his stomach churn. It was a mix of ages long gone, mothballs, and the scent of damp wood. Inside, pages filled with notes and sketches beckoned to him. The words were spidery, as if written in a hurry or perhaps by a trembling hand. The drawings depicted twisted creatures under a pale moonlight and portrayed dark rituals that made Tommy's heart pound with excitement and fright alike. But it was the last page that made his heart race the fastest. It contained a poem, crafted with jagged letters that appeared almost alive on the page. The words were eerie, each line like a whisper from a forgotten darkness. "Whoever speaks my words aloud," it began, "shall summon death's embrace. Recite them not, lest you find your fate entwined with wretched grace." The lines seemed to curl like smoke around him, sending a shiver down Tommy's spine and wrapping him in an unsettling energy. It felt as if the words were alive, waiting for someone brave, or foolish, to bring them to life. Despite the foreboding presence surrounding the poem, Tommy couldn't resist the urge to share it with his friends. That evening, they gathered in their beloved treehouse, a place filled with laughter, albeit now tinged with unease. The air was thick with the earthy smell of musty wood and remnants of summer's warmth, but tonight it felt strange, almost electric. Tommy lit a flickering candle that cast dancing shadows on the wooden walls, and with his friends clustered around him, he began to read the ominous words. "Whoever speaks my words aloud." As the last syllable left his lips, a sudden chill swept through the air, causing the candle's flame to flicker wildly. The laughter that filled the treehouse just moments before evaporated, replaced by a heavy silence. Tommy's friends exchanged uneasy glances, fear creeping into their hearts like a dark vine strangling a tree. "Did you feel that?" Lucy, the bravest of the group, stammered, her voice barely a whisper, on the edge of cracking. The other children nodded, their eyes wide with fright, some even shivering. Tommy, sensing their rising fear, not wanting to dampen the fun, laughed nervously, brushing it off as nothing more than a draft. Deep down, however, he felt a tremor of dread clenching at his insides. It was a feeling he couldn't fully understand, an instinct that warned him, nudging him away from the darkness he had just invited in. The following day, an unexpected storm rolled into Graythorn. The sky darkened, clouds swirling ominously overhead like angry beasts, and lightning slashed across the sky like jagged claws. The wind howled and rattled against the windows, and streets flooded, creating small rivers that rushed through the town. The scent of rain mixed with the earthy aroma of wet grass hung thick in the air, and a sense of foreboding crept into the townsfolk. Gossip spread like wildfire, and anxious families gathered in their homes, feeling an awareness of something not quite right. As the storm raged outside, Tommy huddled alone in his room. The wind howled like a pack of wolves, and the rain beat against the windows, an unsettling rhythm that matched the pounding of Tommy's heart. He felt small against the elements, plagued by thoughts of the poem he had read and the chill that had followed. An uneasy feeling curled around his heart, but he pushed it away, believing firmly that it was all just a silly story. Surely, there was nothing to worry about. He tried to convince himself, repeating those very words in his head. As the days passed, strange occurrences began to unravel in Graythorn. Whispers filled the school halls as his friends discussed nightmarish visions they had encountered. Shadows flickered just beyond their line of sight, as if they were being watched by unseen eyes. Sleep eluded them, replaced by a constant tension that unnerved the group. They grew increasingly restless, their minds restless with thoughts they couldn't quite grasp. Despite their fears, they found themselves drawn back to the treehouse, where the memory of that cursed poem lingered like an unwelcome guest. One evening, unable to shake the poem from his thoughts, Tommy returned to the journal, the leather feeling cool beneath his fingertips. He reread the lines, feeling their weight settle over him. Each word lured him in, a web of temptation he couldn't escape. In a fit of reckless curiosity, he decided to read it aloud again, thinking perhaps it was just an old wives' tale that had frightened them. The words echoed in his mind, haunting and captivating. This time, he wrapped his fingers tightly around the journal, knowing he was teetering on the brink of something dangerous. As he recited the poem once more, the atmosphere shifted, thickening like fog enveloping the trees. The moment he finished, he felt an agonizing pressure in the air, as though the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Moments later, a shriek pierced the night, echoing through the town like a ghostly reminder of the horrors that lingered just beyond the veil of the ordinary. Tommy jumped at the sound, his skin crawling with fear. What had he done? Panic rushed through him, the air heavy with dread. The next day, the news spread through Graythorn like wildfire. Old Mrs. Grimshaw, the town's reclusive resident known for her peculiar habits and shadowy past, had been found lifeless in her home. The details were gruesome, her body twisted grotesquely as if caught in a nightmare. Whispers filled the streets. Could it be tied to the strange happenings surrounding the children? Could their innocent exploration of the dark poem have unleashed a terrible curse? Tommy and his friends gathered at the treehouse that evening, a nervous energy gripping them as they took their seats on the creaky wooden floor. They exchanged anxious glances, their faces pale as the evening sky darkened around them. The once cozy atmosphere now felt heavy, as if a shadow loomed over them all. It was Lucy who finally broke the silence, her voice trembling, echoing their collective dread. "We have to stop reading that poem. We can't let it take anyone else." But Tommy, ever the curious adventurer, felt an undeniable pull deep within him. He was torn, caught between the thrill of uncovering secrets and the fear bubbling underneath the surface. It was all so exciting and terrifying at once, a mix that was hard to resist. The desire for knowledge thrummed in his mind, seducing him with its tantalizing call. The ominous words of the poem throbbed in his mind like an obstinate beat, refusing to fade away. Little did they know, this was only the beginning. The more the group lingered over the poem, the more its sinister grip tightened around them like tendrils of mist. Every recitation seemed to echo back at them, weaving a tapestry of dread. With each rising whisper of the poem, uncertainty coiling around their hearts, it became clear that they had stirred something far more ancient and malevolent than any of them could have ever imagined. The air thickened with unspoken fear as they pondered the path ahead, footsteps echoing toward an ominous fate. As the days turned into weeks, the events surrounding the cursed poem intensified, like dark clouds gathering for a storm. A sinister cycle established itself around Tommy and his friends, binding them in a web of misfortune that seemed impossible to escape. Each time they recited the lines from the leather-bound journal, strange and terrible happenings followed closely behind, like shadows looming over them, waiting to pounce. It all began with something small yet heartbreaking. Tommy had a pet rabbit named Thumper, whom he loved dearly. He remembered how Thumper would hop around happily in his little cage, his fur soft and warm, his nose twitching with excitement whenever Tommy walked by. But one morning, Tommy found Thumper lying still, his tiny body lifeless in the cage. The sight of his beloved pet, once so full of energy and play, filled Tommy's heart with a heavy sorrow. Tears streamed down his young face as he buried Thumper beneath the old oak tree in his backyard, saying a few words of goodbye. The world felt colder that day. Then, a more dreadful calamity struck. Lucy's grandmother, who always greeted the children with warm cookies and stories of her youth, became gravely ill. She was a kind older woman who had once told Tommy and his friends tales of adventure and magic. She could often be seen baking cookies that filled the neighborhood with delicious aromas. But now, Lucy's grandmother lay in bed, twisting in agony, her face twisted in pain. Tommy could hear Lucy's muffled sobs from the other side of the town, and his heart was heavy with worry for his friend. Despite the creeping horror settling in the pit of their stomachs, Tommy felt the poem's dark allure growing stronger. Each word had woven itself into their lives, embedding a sense of doom that both terrified and fascinated him. It was almost like the words whispered secrets to him, drawing him deeper into their mystery, tantalizing and haunting at the same time. It was during yet another gathering at the treehouse, a place that was once safe and comforting, that Tommy finally voiced his growing concerns, feeling nervous but determined. "Maybe we should burn the journal," he suggested hesitantly, watching his friend's reactions closely, like an artist seeking approval for a new painting. "Burn it?" Adam scoffed, rolling his eyes as if Tommy had proposed something silly. He waved his hand dismissively, as if trying to brush away Tommy's idea as if it were a pesky fly buzzing about. "That won't stop it. You heard the poem, it's too late for that." The others nodded in agreement, their faces pale from the horror they had already witnessed. Yet, even while they spoke, Tommy could feel an unsettling flutter of doubt take root in his heart. It was as if something inside him was whispering that perhaps they had the power to fight back, even if they didn't fully understand it. Tommy felt the weight of the journal pressing down on him, heavy with secrets and darkness. It was his choice to understand these haunting words that had brought them together as friends, but it was also that same choice that seemed to unleash a torrent of misfortune upon them. Guilt settled bitterly on his tongue like sour candy. The cursed poem called to him like a ravenous beast, its echo twisting into a haunting melody that intertwined with their lives, pulling them closer to an unknown fate. As the group fell deeper into despair, the town itself began to feel the effects of their recklessness. Pets vanished without a trace, leaving their owners distraught and searching. Crops wilted in the fields, even though the farmers worked tirelessly under the sun, trying to beat back nature's curse. Sickness spread like smoke through the populace, families hidden behind closed doors, fear etched deeply into their features. Tommy stood at the edge of the treehouse, peering out at the world beyond, realizing that their folly had awakened something malevolent, something lurking like a shadow at the edge of their lives, gaining strength with each day that passed. Desperate for an escape from this torment, Tommy turned once more to the journal, hoping to find answers in its pages amid the chaos. Each night, the pages called to him, drawing him closer as he grappled with what he had unleashed. With each recitation of the poem, he fantasized about understanding the dark power behind it, hoping perhaps to find a clue on how to counteract its effects. But before long, he began to feel as though the words had morphed into living entities, thrashing about in his mind. They shrouded his thoughts in darkness, whispering promises of power and knowledge, urging him to uncover their true meaning. Yet each time he heeded their call, it drew him ever closer to the edge of a frightful abyss. In a moment of reckless determination and grasping at straws, Tommy convinced his friends to meet one last time at the treehouse to confront the curse and seek a resolution. "We have to recite it again," he declared, his voice trembling with a strange blend of excitement and terror, a dangerous mixture, like fuel to a fire. "Maybe we'll figure out how to break it." His friends, weary yet strangely drawn in by his fervor, reluctantly agreed. The thrill of seeking adventure surged through them, battling against their fears. As the candle flickered in the stifling air of the treehouse, casting dancing shadows on the walls, the children gathered closely, hearts pounding like drums in a dreary symphony. Tommy took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, and began to recite the words, each syllable dripping with malice, like sweet poison on his tongue. "Whoever speaks my words aloud." Each phrase hung heavy in the air, as chill crept up their spines like icy fingers. This time, it felt more menacing, as if the darkness itself was beginning to take shape, ready to burst forth from the pages. Once again, the moment he finished, a grotesque howl echoed from the woods, drowning out their sharp gasps and mingling with the winds. The air thrummed with a kind of energy that was almost alive, as if the very earth below them had stirred in response to their words. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, and twisted shapes lurked just beyond the faint light from the candle, making the children choke on their growing fear. Then came the dreadful phone call, splitting the air like thunder. An eerie stillness settled over the treehouse, heavy and suffocating, as Tommy's heart raced, anticipation coiling around him like a serpent. Adam's eyes darkened with horror as he answered the phone, and a moment later, he dropped it in shock, the device clattering against the wooden floor. "My little sister, she's gone. They can't find her." Panic gripped the group, their hearts pounding against their ribcages as they exchanged terror-stricken glances, each of them caught in a whirlwind of dread. It became painfully clear to Tommy that his reckless thirst for knowledge had led them deeper into a web of despair, entangling them in its sinister grip. Each recitation of the poem only solidified the curse, tethering them closer to dark forces, actively raising something monstrous in response to each desperate utterance. The children were trapped within a nightmare from which there would be no awakening. Mr. Morrow, the town's mayor, addressed the townsfolk, his own voice shaking with straining authority, urging them not to give in to fear. But Tommy knew, deep down, they all felt the overwhelming thickness of darkness encroaching on their small town. Days turned into dreary nights filled with endless dread, and as the town slowly descended into chaos, Tommy's guilt festered like an open wound. The sorrowful cries of families echoed through the streets, a haunting melody that played a tragic tune over and over in his mind. Each time he looked into the eyes of his friends, he could see the reflection of their own terror mirrored back at him, just like ghosts lost in a forgotten world. A part of him wished he could rip out the page from the journal and banish it forever, but the longing to uncover the story behind the curse was far too powerful, like a magnet pulling him closer to its darkness. One fateful evening, amid the crippling despair that seemed to envelop the town like a suffocating blanket, Tommy could no longer resist the terrible urge that plagued him. In his desperate state, he decided to visit the town library, a place known for its musty books and dusty shelves, hoping to uncover the origins of the cursed poem. The town librarian, whose presence often felt enigmatic, was a peculiar woman with wisps of gray hair and deep-set, insightful eyes. She was often regarded as the keeper of the town's dark secrets. As Tommy entered the library, the chill in the air seemed to penetrate to his very bones, and he shivered as he wrapped his arms around himself for warmth. "Ah, young Tommy," the librarian greeted him, an unsettling smile creeping onto her lips, making Tommy feel uneasy yet curious. "I see you're drawn to stories that breathe of darkness. What are you seeking?" Tommy's heart raced, the sound pounding in his chest like a wild drum, but he found the courage to ask about the journal and the poem that had turned their lives upside down. As she spoke, each chilling detail she shared felt like icy fingers wrapping around his spine. The realization hit him like a frigid wave crashing onto the shore. This poem had once belonged to a forsaken witch, condemned to roam the earth as punishment for her twisted deeds. She conjured malevolent spirits through her words, the librarian explained, her voice dropping to a guttural whisper, sending shivers down Tommy's back. And she cursed her creation to devour the souls of those who dared to recite it. Tommy's blood ran cold, his heart hammers in his chest as he envisioned the horrors that lay in wait for him and his friends. Terror seized him, tightening its grip around his throat. Yet, even in his fear, the insidious pull of the poem was already drawing him back into its dark embrace, like a moth to a flame. It was a dance with danger that he couldn't resist. That night, as he lay in bed, he could hardly find sleep. The whispers of the poem echoed in his mind like a haunting lullaby, tugging at him, urging him to embrace the curse and understand its true power. The pull of the words felt like an inevitable tide washing over him, twisting around him like choking vines, squeezing tightly until he could barely breathe. As the days passed by like long shadows behind their waking lives, he wrestled with the pain of knowing that he carried a heavy burden upon his small shoulders. The cursed journal, once an innocent article, had shifted into a vessel of dread, casting a long and eerie shadow over their friendships. Tommy felt that he would have to face this darkness not just for himself, but for his friends. After all, the journey of understanding, however perilous, could be the only way to set things right, if only he could find the courage to confront it. Gathered in the treehouse once more, Tommy felt the atmosphere shift. The sunlight had begun to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, but the warmth outside did little to chase away the growing chill inside their wooden hideout. They were prepared for another reading of the cursed poem, and Tommy felt a weight of dread settle over them like a suffocating cloak, heavy and oppressive. Each of his friends had their own worries swirling around like loose leaves in the wind. They had witnessed the consequences of their actions after reading the poem, and each misfortune seemed to weave its way through their lives like a grotesque tapestry, unraveling their daily joys. Yet, despite the fear curled tightly in their stomachs, the grip of curiosity remained unyielding. There was an almost magical force drawing them back to the very words that haunted their dreams, and they felt helpless to resist it. In the dim light offering just enough brightness to illuminate the journal, Tommy gripped its pages tightly, his fingers trembling with a mix of fear and exhilaration. He could feel the shivers running through his spine, a mix of excitement and dread. Clearing his throat, Tommy squared his shoulders and began the recitation, "Whoever speaks my words aloud." His voice trembled slightly, but he pushed through. As he spoke, a palpable chill filled the air. It slithered between the friends like a living entity, twisting around them as if it had a mind of its own. The echoes of the poem, once just murmurs, now hung heavy in the air, wrapping around them like a warm blanket that had turned cold and damp. The words seemed to pulsate with power, filling the treehouse with an anxious energy that made Tommy's heart race. This was why they had come together, to understand a mystery larger than themselves, even if understanding came at a cost. But when he uttered the final word, a heavy silence enveloped the forest surrounding them. It was as if the whole world had paused, holding its breath. The distant howl of the wind grew ominously loud, slicing through the stillness like a knife. Shadows danced at the edges of the flickering candlelight, contorting into grotesque shapes that twisted and turned and threatened to reach out for them, drawing the children into their sinister embrace. Tommy felt his heart race even faster, urging him to abandon the journal in an attempt to escape the growing darkness. But something deep within him, something dark, felt as if it had latched onto his soul, holding him captive. It was too late to turn back. Consumed by fear, a frantic energy crackled in the air, and the friends looked at each other, wide-eyed. "We need to get rid of that journal," Adam blurted out, his voice shaky, almost desperate. The urgency in his tone spoke the thoughts they all shared. But Tommy's stubbornness festered and refused to allow him to let go. "It's just a story. How bad could it really be?" He shot back, trying to sound brave but hearing the quiver in his own voice. The atmosphere grew thicker with tension, turning almost palpable like a heavy fog surrounding them. Lucy and Adam exchanged worried glances. They were uncertain about how to bridge the abyss between their mounting dread and Tommy's reckless pursuit of knowledge. It was like watching a friend step too close to a cliff with eyes closed, and they were terrified of what lay on the other side. The next morning brought with it grim news. Word spread quickly through Greythorn of a devastating fire that had consumed old Mr. Bishop's barn. The flames had raged uncontrollably, leaving nothing but gray ashes in its wake. Tommy's heart sank like a stone in his chest as he realized the man had just returned home from the hospital after being unwell, and now his family faced yet another devastating loss. Each misfortune connected back to them like the strands in a spider's web, each heartbeat echoing the curse that felt increasingly malevolent and sinister. Days blurred together like drizzles of paint on a canvas, and the pattern of sorrow continued to escalate. Strange figures were spotted lurking near the woods, and whispers of ghostly sightings swept through the town like wildfire. Each story was another reminder of the darkness creeping ever closer to their lives. Grim shadows appeared at windows, clawing at the edges of dreams, making it nearly impossible for the townsfolk to find peace. Tension hung in the air like fog, smothering their community, which had transformed into a sanctuary of nightmares. Despite the nightmarish onslaught of horror affecting their lives and the lives of those around them, Tommy clung to the poem like it was a lifeline. He was aware that the words had taken control of their lives in the most terrifying of ways. They had grown into an insatiable hunger, devouring their sanity, hope, and the laughter that once filled their days. His friends were crumbling under the pressure. Their eyes, once full of light, now looked pale and hollow because of the shadow that loomed relentlessly over them, a reflection of the darkness consuming their spirits. On another ominous evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Tommy finally could no longer ignore the looming dread pulsing like a drumbeat in his chest. The pull of the cursed poem tormented him, whispering that if he could understand its true nature and the horrors it brought, perhaps he might uncover a way to end this terrible cycle. Seeking answers, he ventured back to the town library, a place that felt more haunted than ever, with the librarian now a specter in his memories, her words echoing ominously in his mind like an unsettling melody. Stepping into the dimly lit room, he spotted the librarian hunched over her desk, scribbling notes on aged parchment like a fierce alchemist toiling over an ancient spell. "Ah, returned so soon, have you?" she mused, her gaze lifting to meet his with a sinister glimmer in her eyes that made Tommy shiver. He felt the weight of her supernatural presence pressing on him, a tangible reminder of the otherworldly knowledge she possessed. "What more do you wish to uncover?" she whispered, her voice an unsettling blend of caution mixed with temptation, as if she was both warning him and beckoning him closer. Desperate for redemption, and feeling lost in the confusion created by the cursed poem, Tommy pressed on, revealing his desire to learn more about the ancient ritual, one crafted by the witch long ago that could possibly release them from the curse. The librarian's expression shifted, revealing a magnitude of concern as she warned him, "But beware." Her voice morphed into a guttural murmur, carrying a weight that made the hairs on the back of Tommy's neck stand on end. Many souls have attempted this before, only to suffer a fate worse than death. The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. He was so close to the knowledge he sought that retreating now felt impossible. Armed with the newfound details of the mysterious ritual, Tommy hurried back to the treehouse to share everything with his friends. They were waiting for him, their faces appeared pale, and their eyes were wide with apprehension, swirling with unspoken fears that filled the air between them. But Tommy's resolve had hardened in the presence of the librarian's grave warning. "There's a way to break the curse," he proclaimed, but even as he said it, he felt the timid glimmer of hope in his own heart flickering briefly like a flame caught in a gust of wind. Lucy's voice trembled as she glanced at him, uncertainty weaving through her words. "But what if it doesn't work, Tommy? What if it makes things worse?" As her distressed expression mirrored the worries they all shared, desperation hung thick in the air. The friends engaged in a heated debate as unease crept beneath their skin like an unwelcome intruder. Yet, the dark energy of the journal continued to lure Tommy toward its sinister embrace, gnawing at the edges of his thoughts, coaxing him toward the unknown. He spoke of shadows, whispers, dark corners of the woods, and an uncertainty that cast vast clouds over their decision. Determined to confront the darkness head-on, Tommy led the group in an attempt to break the curse one final time. "We can't let fear control us," he shouted defiantly, even as the terror gnawed at his gut, feeling as if it would swallow him whole. Together, they held hands, forming a strong circle of friendship and mutual trust. As they stood together in the treehouse, the wooden walls shielded them from the night's chilly breath, but the outside darkness felt more foreboding than ever. Tommy held onto the journal tightly, its pages warm against his skin with an energy that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Taking a deep breath, he began reciting the poem anew, his voice ringing out into the night. Just as he did so, a thunderous clap of lightning reverberated through the air, shaking the ground beneath them as if nature itself was protesting their actions. A bone-chilling roar echoed from the depths of the woods, the sound foreign and terribly alive, flooding the night with terror. As they spoke the words, the shadows in their treehouse seemed to congeal and twist, forming a monstrous figure that began to materialize at the very edge of their sanctuary. The flickering candlelight cast terrifying illusions on the walls, and as the figure took form, it became horrifically real, its features obscured by darkness and malice so profound that it took their breath away. Panic seized them all, and a wave of terror washed over them like a frigid ocean. "Tommy, stop!" Lucy screamed, and her voice cut through the heavy air like a knife, but it was too late. The very words he spoke had awakened something inside the cursed poem, binding the fate of everyone present to a reality soaked in horror and suffering. Shadows rippled around them, and the air grew thicker with a malevolent force that promised chaos and despair. In that moment, as they faced the unknown, they had to wrestle with their courage and the choices that had led them here. Each heartbeat pulsed with the weight of their fear, binding them closer together, and they could only hope that within the darkness, they would find the strength to reclaim their lives. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery light over the clearing where the children stood. The trees surrounding them were tall, their dark trunks reaching up toward the sky like giant pillars. The air was still, but there was an electric tension that filled the space. The friends had been so excited when they found the old journal, thinking they would uncover secrets and stories. Little did they know that turning those pages would awaken something terrible. From the shadows between the trees, a monstrous figure began to emerge. It was like nothing Tommy had ever seen. The creature was enormous, towering over them and blotting out the moonlight. Its form was twisted and jagged, shifting like the darkness itself. It looked like it had been made from shadows, with edges so dark they seemed to swallow up the light. As it moved closer, Tommy felt his heart pound like a drum in his chest. The hollow eyes of the shadowy creature bore down on him, filling him with a bone-chilling dread. "Tommy," Adam's voice broke through the thick fog of terror that enveloped him. "What have you done?" Adam's face had turned pale, almost ghostly, matching the color of the moonlight. The other children, Sarah, Lily, and Max, stood frozen in place, their eyes wide with fear. The air around them seemed to pulse with an energy that made the hairs on their arms stand up. Tommy could feel the waves of panic pushing against him from all directions. "I thought we could break it," he exclaimed, his voice shaking. He thought back to the moments before they had opened the journal, how excited they had been to read the poem written inside. It had seemed so magical then, so full of possibilities. But now, standing face to face with this horror, he realized the terrible mistake they had made. Desperately, he clutched the journal, his fingers gripping it so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He felt the weight of it like a heavy rock in his hands. The pages, once filled with enticing words, now felt like chains binding him to a nightmare. He searched for a way to undo what they had started, but his mind was a tangled knot of dread and regret. The shadows around him flickered ominously, making grotesque shapes that twisted and turned, mocking their fear. Suddenly, the whispers began, soft at first, but then growing louder. "You called us forth. Now you must pay the price." The voices echoed in his mind, dark and cruel, wrapping around him like chains that pulled tighter with each word. The creature loomed closer, and Tommy could feel a chill creeping into his heart, as if the creature was absorbing his warmth and hope. Each whisper seemed to amplify his fear, and he felt himself being dragged into a whirlpool of darkness. Tommy's heart raced as he watched the shadows reach out for his friends. "Help!" They cried out in terror, their voices heavy with despair as tendrils of darkness wrapped around them. The shadows twisted their features, turning them into contorted masks of horror. Adam's eyes widened in fear, a silent plea for rescue that Tommy could not reach. Sarah, with her brown curls, looked back at him with a mixture of fright and disbelief in her gaze. "No," Tommy shouted, panic surging through him. He felt helpless, as if he were stuck in a dream that he couldn't wake up from. The realization hit him hard. The curse they had awakened was more powerful than anything he had imagined. The words of the poem had not just been words, they had been a call, a whisper that unleashed something sinister. In a moment of sheer panic, Tommy made a desperate decision. He tightened his grip on the journal, raising it as if it were a shield. "I'll destroy it, I swear," he shouted into the encroaching darkness, hoping the words would somehow have power. But the shadows only laughed, a chilling sound that slashed through the air like a knife. "It's too late for that," they hissed in unison, the creature looming ever closer, its jagged form expanding as it began to consume the very essence of his friends. Tommy's pleas for help drowned in the cacophony of darkness, and he surged forward, desperate to reach the door of safety. But the shadows tightened their grip, wrapping around him like ice against his skin. He felt their coldness seeping into his bones, anchoring him to the ground, paralyzing him. His heart thudded painfully in his chest as he turned back toward his friends, their faces twisted in agony and fear. With every passing moment, hope slipped further away. The darkness pulsed with energy, alive and hungry, and in the depths of his soul, he could feel the journal laughing, a dark, terrible satisfaction echoing within the very words that had brought this horror upon them. As his friends cried out, their voices mingling with the shadows, Tommy understood that there would be no escape from the curse, no way to turn back time. One by one, he watched as the light slowly dimmed from their eyes. The last echoes of their laughter faded into the encroaching silence, replaced by guttural screams that filled the night with despair. Tommy felt as though their cries were scratching at his heart, each one a reminder of the nightmare he had unleashed. As the darkness consumed them, he felt his own heart begin to sink, weighed down by the guilt of what he had done. The air around them grew heavier, as if it was pressing down on Tommy, suffocating him beneath the weight of despair. Every passing moment felt like a lifetime of anguish, every fleeting thought of hope slipping away like grains of sand through his fingers. The shadows twisted and danced, creating shapes that made it hard to think. He felt as if he were losing pieces of himself, bits of his joy and innocence being swallowed whole by the darkness. Then, just when he thought the world could not become any more unbearable, everything went silent. The shadows pulled back, leaving Tommy standing alone in the suffocating darkness, an empty space where his friends had just been. The journal slipped from his grasp, hitting the ground with a dull thud that echoed in the void. "You sought power, and now you belong to us," the shadows whispered, their voices dripping with malice. Tommy sank to his knees, a deep, suffocating sorrow filling him. The weight of their lost lives crushed down on him, heavy and dark. He looked around, desperate for a sign, a flicker of hope, but found nothing but an all-consuming blackness. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he cried out into the abyss, but there was no answer, only silence. Just as he tried to process what he had lost, the final echo of laughter reverberated in the space around him, a haunting melody that reminded him of how joyful they had been moments before the shadows came. It filled him with a chilling realization. The cursed poem had woven their lives together in a terrible way, ensuring that none of them would ever escape its grasp. Alone in the unforgiving void, Tommy felt himself being pulled deeper into the shadows, the darkness wrapping around him like a suffocating cloak. He fought against it, yearning for light, for his friends, for a way out. But as the shadows closed in, he knew that hope was slipping away, leaving nothing behind except an empty void where laughter and friendship once flourished. As the town of Graythorn lay still and silent under the moonlit sky, a sinister presence surrounded the very place they had played and laughed. The echoes of the children's lives were claimed by the sinister power of a poem, swallowed whole by the abyss. No one would ever know what had truly happened, and the darkness would continue to linger, waiting for the next curious souls to unlock its terrible secrets. The story would remain untold, buried in shadows, a chilling reminder of the price of curiosity and the dangers that lurked just beyond the light.